Welcome back to the Deep Dive. So today we're tackling a topic that, well, I'll be honest, it usually makes my brain cramp up a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
We are trying to mix oil and water today.
Oil and water, that's a volatile combination in the kitchen, but what are we mixing in the studio?
Science.
Yeah.
And spirituality. Usually you have your physics over here, cold, hard facts, things you can measure, equations on a chalkboard.
Right.
And then way over there, safely separated by a very thick wall, you have spirituality, faith, the mystical, the unseen.
And the rule is they don't talk to each other.
Never the twain shall meet.
Yeah.
Exactly. But today we're unpacking a source that claims that divide is not just blurry. It's completely imaginary.
Okay.
We're looking at a piece called The Divine Field, Quantum Physics in the Exodus Reality by Rabbi Shlomo Ezagui. And his core argument here is that if you really understand modern physics, specifically quantum field theory, and you really understand ancient Torah wisdom, they are, in fact, telling the exact same story.
It's a bold claim. But what I love about this piece is that he doesn't just say, oh, it's all the same in some vague, new agey way.
No.
He gets into the mechanics. He argues that the physical universe isn't made of stuff at all. And he uses that physics to explain one of the oldest stories we have, the Exodus from Egypt.
This is the part that hooked me. We're going to find out why Pharaoh wasn't just, a tyrant with a whip, but actually a victim of his own bad psychology. We're going to talk about why a strong east wind was the ultimate mental trap. And honestly, by the end of this, I think we're going to have a totally new definition of what it means to be free.
It really forces you to look at your own reality differently, not as a collection of solid objects, but as a shimmering dance of energy.
A shimmering dance of energy. I like that. But before we get to the dance, we have to deal with the floor. We have to talk about the physics.
Right.
Because I think most of us, myself included, are still operating on the high school chemistry version of the universe.
The billiard ball model.
Yes. You have atoms. They're like tiny, hard little marbles. They bump into each other in a void. And if you zoom in enough, you hit something solid. That's reality. It feels intuitive.
It feels intuitive because that's how we experience the world. I mean, I knock on this desk, it stops my hand. Solid hits solid. That's the classical Newtonian view. And for everyday life, it works fine.
Sure.
But the source points out that this is what's called the materialist illusion. It's the idea that the universe is built from isolated particles, isolated stuff that exists independently in empty space.
And Rabbi Ezagui is saying this is just wrong. Because if my desk isn't solid, I have some concerns about my coffee cup staying put.
Your coffee is safe, don't worry.
Yeah.
But the nature of the desk is different than we think. The source points to quantum field theory, or QFT.
Sure.
In QFT, the universe isn't built from particles. It's built from fields.
Fields.
Yeah, you have the electromagnetic field, the gravitational field, the Higgs field. These fields permeate every single inch of space. They are everywhere.
Okay, so help me visualize this. If I'm holding an apple and I zoom in past the skin, past the cells, down to the electrons, what am I actually looking at?
You are not looking at a tiny independent object. You're looking at a ripple in the field.
A ripple.
Think of the ocean. If you see a wave moving across the water, you don't say, oh, look, that wave is a separate object distinct from the ocean. You know it's just the water moving in a specific way.
It's an activity of the water.
Exactly. In this view, matter, the apple, your hand, the chair you're sitting on, is just a localized vibration in a unified ocean of energy. An excitation, to use the technical term.
That is uncomfortably trippy.
Yeah.
So essentially, there are no things. There is just the activity of the field.
Precisely. And this leads to a massive shift in how we understand empty space.
Right.
In the old billiard ball view, space is just a container. It's a void where nothing happens. But in QFT, the source explains that this void is actually, it's fully alive. It's an ever-present potential. It's a womb from which the cosmos is continually emerging.
Okay, I think I'm with you on the science. We have this invisible, all-encompassing field that gives rise to everything. But here's where the source makes the pivot that I didn't see coming. Because science stops there, right? Science says, here's the math for how the field ripples. It doesn't say what the field is.
That is the million-dollar question. What is the ocean? And this is where the rabbi brings in Chassidic philosophy. He argues that this field is a locus infinite divine energy.
So he's mapping the physics directly onto theology.
Yes. There's a famous concept in Judaism, ein od milvado.
Okay.
It translates to, there is nothing else besides him. Now, usually people interpret that to mean there are no other gods. Don't worship statues, don't have a pantheon.
Right, monotheism 101, one God, no competition.
But the Chassidic interpretation is much more literal and much more radical. It means there is nothing else. There is no reality outside of God. If the universe is a field, God isn't just the architect who built the field and walked away. The field is the divine presence.
That's heavy. That means my coffee cup is. Divine energy.
The source uses the term Devar Hashem, the word of God.
Uh-huh.
It says, this creative force must constantly pulse within every atom just to keep it from vanishing back into nothingness. If the speech stopped for a nanosecond, the universe wouldn't just crumble, it would cease to exist.
So when a physicist sees a quark vibrating, a mystic sees the word of God speaking existence into being in real time.
Exactly. Science calls it a field. Torah calls it divine speech. But the structural understanding that everything is one unified existence and that matter is just a surface appearance is identical.
Okay, so that's the foundation. Everything is God. The separation is an illusion. Now, let's make the jump that I found so surprising. We go from quantum mechanics to Pharaoh.
It seems like a left turn, doesn't it?
A huge left turn. I mean, we usually think of Pharaoh as the villain of the Exodus story. He's the guy with the whip. He enslaved the Israelites. He got hit with 10 plagues. Standard bad guy stuff.
Yeah.
But the source paints a much more nuanced picture of his mindset.
The source describes Pharaoh not just as a king, but as the ultimate separatist.
A separatist.
Yeah. If the reality of the universe is unity, that everything is part of the divine field, Pharaoh represents the consciousness that screams, I am separate, I am independent.
He's the anti-field.
In a way, yes. He believed he possessed independent power. He thought his will was completely separate from the creators. He was the ultimate believer in the billiard ball universe.
That he was a solid object.
That he was a solid, independent object with his own power. He looked at the Nile and said, I made this.
So he's a bad physicist.
He's a terrible physicist. And this brings up one of the trickiest parts of the Bible, which I was really glad the source tackled, the hardening of the heart.
Oh, the classic dilemma.
It's a stumbling block for a lot of people.
Yeah. I remember asking this in Sunday school. The text says God hardened Pharaoh's heart. And I thought, well, hold on. If God is pulling the strings, then Pharaoh is just a puppet. And if he's a puppet, how can you punish him for not letting the people go? It feels like a rigged game.
It's a very valid objection. If God controls his heart, there is no free will. But Rabbi Ezagui's explanation here, drawing on Chassidic thought, offers a totally different mechanism. He says it wasn't robotic control, it was concealment.
Concealment. Unpack that for me. How does hiding make someone stubborn?
Well, think about it this way. If God had appeared to Pharaoh with undeniable, overwhelming clarity fire in the sky, a giant booming voice that shook the foundations of the palace, would Pharaoh have rebelled?
No way. He would have been on his face in 2 seconds. You don't argue with a volcano.
Exactly, but that's not free will. That's just being crushed by reality.
Okay.
If a police officer is standing 2 feet away from you, do you choose not to speed? No, you're compelled by the immediate presence of authority.
So by hardening his heart, God was actually backing off.
Yes. God concealed his authority. By hiding the obvious divine nature of the events, God allowed Pharaoh's ego to flourish. It gave Pharaoh the illusion of autonomy. It created a space where Pharaoh could convince himself that he could outsmart Moses.
So the hardening was God stepping back to let Pharaoh be Pharaoh.
Precisely. And there's a specific moment the source mentions that highlights this blindness perfectly. The plague of lice.
Why lice? Of all the plagues, blood, frogs, hail, why does the source focus on the lice?
It's a crucial turning point. When the lice appeared, Pharaoh's own magicians, who were experts in dark arts and trickery, they threw up their hands. They couldn't replicate it, and they admitted, this is the finger of God.
So even the magicians saw the field. They saw the glitch in the matrix.
They did. They recognized that this wasn't natural. It was the underlying reality poking through. But Pharaoh, he saw the same thing, but he rationalized it away. He convinced himself it was just a natural curiosity, something he could manage.
Right.
He refused to submit to the infinite hand and only saw a finger he thought he could break.
That is such a human reaction, though.
Yeah.
We see something that challenges our worldview, and instead of changing our worldview, we just explain away the anomaly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just a weird coincidence.
Rationalization is the ego's #1 defense mechanism. Pharaoh was fighting for the idea that there is a realm outside of God's unity where he could be the boss. He desperately wanted the universe to be billiard balls, so he could be the biggest ball on the table.
Which brings us to the ultimate setup. The trap at the Red Sea. Now, I've seen the movies. Charlton Heston, Prince of Egypt. The sea splits, boom, walls of water instantly. It's dramatic.
It makes for great cinema, but the source points out a specific detail in the text that the movies usually gloss over, or at least they don't explain the significance of. It says, God used a strong east wind that blew all night to split the waters.
All night. Why the wind? If you're God, you don't need wind. You can just delete the water.
Right.
Or teleport the people. Why use a slow, all-night weather effect?
This is my favorite part of the analysis. The wind was an exit ramp for Pharaoh's intellect. It was a trap designed specifically for a materialist.
How is it a trap?
If the sea splits instantly without cause, it's undeniably a miracle. Even Pharaoh would have to stop. But a wind.
A wind is a weather event.
A wind is a weather event. Pharaoh looked at that strong east wind, and his military mind kicked in. He thought, this is a natural phenomenon. It's rare, sure, a freak storm, but it's nature. And if it's nature, I can use it. I can cross too.
He thought nature operated independently of God. He thought, this is just physics. I can exploit physics.
Exactly. He fell into the trap of taiva nature. The source explains that the Hebrew word for nature, hateva, is linguistically related to the word for drowning or sinking.
Whoa.
Nature is designed to hide the divine force within it.
That is fascinating. So the wind was camouflage.
It was divine camouflage. It tested whether Pharaoh could see the source behind the nature. It was the ultimate test of his perception.
And because he couldn't or wouldn't see the divine within the natural wind, he drove his chariots right into the seabed.
And that sealed his fate. His insistence that he could operate outside of divine reality is literally what drowned him. He tried to use the wind as a tool for his ego, not realizing the wind was the breath of the god he was fighting.
It's tragic, really. He was offered a chance to see the truth, but the camouflage was just good enough that his ego could latch onto it. He died believing he was just unlucky with the weather.
And that brings us to the application part of the source, because if we just leave this as a story about a guy in a chariot 3,000 years ago, we miss the point.
Yeah, the source says explicitly, Pharaoh is not just a historical figure. Pharaoh is a state of mind.
The rabbi points out that the Hebrew word for Egypt, Mitzrayim, literally means narrowness or constraint.
So we are in Egypt whenever we are in a state of narrow consciousness.
Yes. Whenever we believe that our careers, our talents, or our bank accounts exist independently of the field, independently of God, we are acting out the role of Pharaoh. We're living in the illusion of separateness.
I want to dig into the metaphor of the staff of Moses here because I think it explains this perfectly. Moses walks around with this stick. He uses it to turn the Nile to blood. He uses it to split the sea. Later, he uses it to hit a rock to get water.
Right, this is a multi-purpose tool.
But the source emphasizes, the stick has no power. The stick is just a stick.
It's what the source calls a nullified extension. Think of a surgeon's scalpel. Does the scalpel cure the patient? No. The scalpel is just a piece of metal. If I held it, I'd probably just hurt someone.
Right.
The surgeon cures the patient. The scalpel is just an extension of the surgeon's hand. It has no will of its own.
So if Moses thought he or the stick was doing the magic, he'd be Pharaoh.
Exactly. He would be claiming independent power. But because Moses knew he was just an extension of the divine will, the stick could be a channel for miracles. He was transparent to the field. He didn't block the light. He let it through.
The takeaway there is pretty powerful for us today. It's saying that our jobs, our skills, our assets, they are the staff.
They are neutral. They are excitations in the field to bring it back to the physics. If we think they are the source of our security, if I think my job is what feeds me or my intelligence is what makes me successful, I am enslaved to them. I am in Mitzrayim.
Because if the job goes away, I crumble.
Right, because you've anchored your existence to a ripple, not the ocean. But if you realize they are just tools, just the staff in the hands of the divine will, you become a master over them. You use them, but you aren't owned by them.
And the source brings this back to quantum entanglement, which I thought was a nice touch to close the loop on the science.
Yes, the idea that just as particles are entangled across space and time, meaning they affect each other instantly regardless of distance, the soul is entangled with the infinite.
So the separation we feel, the anxiety that we are alone in the universe fighting for survival, that's the lie.
That's the Pharaoh mindset. We think we are separate billiard balls bouncing around trying not to get crushed, but the truth is we are inextricably linked to the source.
So if that's the problem, thinking we are separate, what is the solution? How does the source define freedom? Because usually freedom means I can do whatever I want. If I want to eat cake for breakfast, I eat cake.
The source is very clear that that is not freedom. If you just do whatever you want, you are a slave to your own desires, your own impulses, your own ego. You're just a reactive collection of biology.
You're a slave to the cake.
You're a slave to the cake, exactly.
So what is real freedom?
True freedom is aligning your personal frequency with the divine frequency.
I like that image. Tuning the radio.
It's realizing, as the Source says, that everything is God. When you understand that, you stop fighting the wind. You stop trying to manipulate nature as if it's an enemy or a tool for your ego. You start moving with the undercurrent of creation.
It's the difference between swimming upstream, fighting every wave, and letting the current carry you.
Or, to use the Source's metaphor, it's seeing that the physical world is just a garment for a deeper reality. When you stop looking at the garment and start looking at the wearer, everything changes. You aren't afraid of losing your stuff because you know the stuff isn't the point.
It's a shift from ownership to stewardship. You don't own the energy, you just direct it.
And that destroys the internal Pharaoh. The Pharaoh within us feeds on the idea of ownership and control. When you admit that it's all the divine field, the ego has nothing left to hold on to. It starves the ego and feeds the soul.
You know, this has been quite a journey. We went from quarks to the Red Sea to our own internal psychological state.
Yeah.
And I think the big aha moment for me is really about that strong east wind.
How so?
Just realizing how often I look at things in my life, challenges, lucky breaks, random events, and I just see weather. I just see random circumstances that I need to navigate or exploit.
Yeah.
I never stop to think, wait, what is the Source trying to tell me here? What is the field doing?
That's the challenge, to see the divine within the natural. It's easy to believe in God when the sea splits instantly. It's hard to believe when it's just a windy night. But the Source argues that the windy night is actually the deeper test.
It's the test of whether we are awake or sleepwalking.
Exactly. Are we looking at the camouflage, or are we seeing the soldier behind it?
So here is a final thought to leave you with, and it's a bit of a provocative one. We've talked about the universe being a shimmering dance of energy, a field of divine will.
Right.
If that is true, if literally everything, from the corks in your hand to the struggles you are facing at work, is just a vibration of that divine frequency, what would happen if you stopped looking at the surface ripples? What if you stopped trying to fix the ripples, your bank account, your social status, your traffic jam, and instead decided to dive into the depths?
It's a scary thought, because it means letting go of the illusion that you're the captain of the ship.
But maybe that's where the only real freedom is. If you want to dive deeper into this, because there's a lot more there, especially about some of the specific Kabbalistic terms we touched on, the source material was The Divine Field by Rabbi Shlomo Ezagui.
It's definitely worth a read if you want to explore that intersection of the mystic and the scientific. It's dense, but rewarding.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the quantum and the divine. We'll see you next time.